Have you ever had a hero that just stuck with you? Not because they had the biggest powers or the most famous name, but because they felt real, because they had to fight harder, rise higher, and earn everything that they got. For me, it was always Tim Drake and Kyle Rayner. They weren't the first to wear the mask, and they didn't get the spotlight the originals did, but they stepped into impossible roles and made them their own.
No kidding.
Now, Tim was the Robin who didn't come from tragedy. He didn't fight to avenge someone. He fought because he believed Batman was losing himself and needed saving. Kyle was the last Green Lantern when the corpse was gone. A kid with the ring and no support, but instead of breaking, he carried the legacy when no one else could. These two didn't just inherit greatness, they earned it. And for a while, DC treated them like the future. But somewhere along the way, that changed. They were pushed aside and quietly replaced, written out of stories that they used to lead. Not because they failed, but because DC didn't know how to let their legacy grow. So in this video, we'll be talking about why Tim Drake and Kyle Rayner mattered, what made them special, and why they deserve better. Starting with Tim Drake. Now I know I have a bias as Tim Drake is my favorite Robin, but he's also the one that made me understand what being Robin was really about. He wasn't chasing vengeance like Jason, and he didn't grow up in a circus like Dick Grayson. Tim chose this life because he believed that Batman needed help. He saw Bruce falling apart after Jason's death, and instead of running away, he ran towards it. And from day one, he earned it through intelligence, empathy, and leadership. Tim showed us that Robin wasn't about tragedy, and that it was about purpose. He was the first Robin to get his own solo run, as he wasn't just a sidekick, but now the lead, and led the Teen Titans. And it wasn't just in comics. Tim appeared in the new Batman Adventures, Young Justice, and even the Arkham games. But we'll get more into that in a bit. But fans began to know his name, and they knew what he brought to the table. But somewhere along the way, DC stopped knowing what to do with him. And it started with the introduction of Damian Wayne. Now, when Damian first appeared, they sidelined Tim to make Damian the new Robin, and they tried to rebrand Tim as Red Robin, giving him a new suit, a new role, and slowly pushed him away from the Robin identity that he had already made iconic. Then came the New 52. They rewrote his origin, claiming that he was never Robin to begin with, and erased everything that he had built from the ground up. It felt like DC was trying to erase his place in the Bat family instead of honoring it, and this shift began to echo throughout all of DC. In the Arkham games, he was barely there. He appeared briefly in the story, but just to give Batman a gadget. And even though he got a playable DLC arc, it was extremely short and didn't allow his character to develop. And in Arkham Knight, he had some cool moments, but no real story, and was often pushed aside. And in the DC animated movie universe, he didn't show up at all, as Damian was used as the main Robin for that universe. And while he had minor roles in other smaller movies, it just wasn't the same. And for a while, it felt like the Tim Drake that I grew up with was just gone. As of recently, DC has been trying to put Tim back in the spotlight, but the response has been mixed. He's had some solo stories again, and he's shown up more often, but it still feels like DC doesn't fully know who Tim is anymore. Instead of building on what made him special, his character has been rebranded and rewritten multiple times, leaving fans like myself to wonder where was the Tim that we grew up with. Which brings me to my next character, Kyle Rayner. Kyle Rayner wasn't supposed to be the next great Green Lantern. He was just a kid, an artist, in the right place at the worst possible time. After Hal Jordan became evil and the Green Lantern Corps was destroyed, Kyle was the only one left. No veteran lanterns, no backup, just him. But that's what made his journey powerful. Kyle didn't step into a system. He had to rebuild it. He learned everything on his own, and instead of folding under pressure, he rose. Where others just used willpower as a weapon, Kyle used it as a bridge. Over time, he went from the rookie that no one expected to one of the greatest lanterns that the Corps has ever seen. He earned the respect of heroes across the DC universe, not through legacy, but through growth. And then he took it a step further and did what no Lantern had done before. He mastered all 7 rings of the emotional spectrum and became the White Lantern, wielding the power of the full spectrum of life itself. That's the level that Kyle had reached, from last Lantern to the most complete. But then the shift came. After Kyle Rayner's arc of becoming a White Lantern, DC started to focus more on Hal Jordan again. Following the end of New Guardians and into DC Rebirth, Kyle was quietly demoted and no longer a lead, just another name in the Corps, with no major arcs and barely a mention in most team projects. He went from headlining cosmic epics to fading into the background. Even when he appears now, it's rarely with the same depth, but the passion behind his stories feel lost, like DC hasn't quite figured out who he is anymore. Now I understand that after the White Lantern arc, they probably felt like his story was complete, but like with other characters, why not just give him a reboot? And as of now, Kyle Rayner doesn't have a solo title, no active story arc, and no real media presence. And it wasn't just in the comics. Kyle barely showed up in animation. He had very minor roles in the DCAU, no arcs in the DC animated movie universe, and as far as video games, he's only appeared in Justice League Heroes and Lego Batman 3. Proving that he's getting done even dirtier than Tim Drake. But if we're being honest, being a fan of either character is extremely frustrating, because when you look at what Tim Drake and Kyle Rayner accomplished, what they overcame and what they stood for, it's actually really embarrassing to see how poorly they've been handled. They weren't filler characters or placeholders, and somehow two of the best legacy characters in the DC universe have become the most forgotten. But it doesn't have to stay that way. Tim and Kyle should be rewritten in ways that honor their legacy. In the comics, they should be given writers who believe in their stories and bring back what made them special. And for other media, it would be nice to see them given roles in the DCU. I saw that there was going to be a live-action Teen Titans movie, and Tim Drake would be the perfect Robin to lead. In the past, James Gunn has said that he wanted to start his Batman universe with the introduction of Damian Wayne, so it would be the perfect opportunity to let Tim Drake lead the Titans. And I know that Jon Stewart is starting off the Green Lanterns, but it would be nice to see Kyle Rayner get developed as the next Green Lantern in line, maybe even with Jon Stewart mentoring him, but I guess we'll just have to see. Hopefully these characters get the justice that they deserve, but let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. And with that being said, I'm Shawnodachi, and I'm out.